Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League. It's a very special edition this week as Linfield and Portadown prepare to battle it out for the first major trophy of the season, the League Cup. It's Premiership versus Championship, it's Belfast versus County Armagh, it's Healy versus Curry. Will the Ports craft up some more cup magic this season to take home a trophy they once won while in the second tier, or will Linfield win it for the second season on the bounce to help kickstart their pursuit of a league title? We're going to go in depth, we're going to preview it all, plus we'll recap the Irish Cup quarter-finals, discuss the fallout of Linfield's impending stadium ban on this, your weekly helping of Kicking Match. With a quarter-final in a cup in the rear view and looking ahead to one of our first big finals, tell me we are in the business end of the season without telling me we are in the business end. And with that, I have brought in two guests to make this an even more special episode. First off, in the blue corner, it is great to welcome back Mark McGuiggan.
How's it going, Peter?
It's doing all right. And your adversary, your other co-host here today, in the red corner, it's great to have on Jonny Dunlop.
Thank you, Peter. Pleased to be here.
It's great to have you. Of course, some people will know you as the voice of a lot of the Portadown streams. You're also the man that asks Niall Curry, or whoever the Portadown manager may be at the time, some of the tough questions. Is that sometimes the more harder part of the job, that you're obviously a fan, but also you're there as a part of the media, where you might have seen a great performance or a bad performance and you're sitting there going, I got to try and keep this right down the middle, or you know what, you're biased anyway, who cares, you're allowed to say we were great, we were rubbish, etc, etc.
I think anybody that gets our streams know that they're a very biased stream. I'm a Portadown supporter first and foremost, and I don't hide that when I'm commentating on the stream, but it can be difficult sometimes, if you're interviewing Niall or whoever it may be, Paul Doolan last season for instance, it can be difficult. To have to remember, I suppose, that when we're doing it as part of We Are Ports TV, it's an in-house production, so I'm not there to grill or ask difficult questions. I'm there to, like you say, play it down the line, but you also want to ask the questions that some supporters are asking as well. It can be difficult sometimes, but in the main, I think people understand that We Are Ports TV and the media side of things at the club is an in-house production, and there's only so much you can ask sometimes, and leave the grilling and all that up to the BBC or the Belfast Telegraph or whoever may be there to ask the real hard-hitting questions.
I'm sure though fans must come up to you, Jonny, and go, ask him about this left back, or ask him about this, or why aren't you doing this kind of thing. I'm sure you get plenty of questions fielded at you, regardless if you want them or not.
Yes, I do, actually. Sometimes I had quite a few when Newington beat us a couple of weeks ago, saying to me, I'm looking forward to your interview tonight, Jonny. I'm looking forward to hearing what questions Niall gets asked this evening. But yeah, people ask that all the time. Built a relationship with Niall or whoever the manager is as well. There's a good relationship there. They're open to the media. They're open to doing these post-match interviews. So you don't want to be saying anything that puts that relationship in jeopardy or leaves bad blood there. So like I say, we asked the sort of the soft-hitting questions, as it may be.
Well, perhaps there didn't need to be any tough questions asked on Friday night as we start our Irish Cup review. We're going to look ahead to the League Cup final. This is why we have both of you on today. But yeah, let's start with Friday night. It was the tie of the round, really, on Friday night. Shamrock Park, it was being streamed, and it was, for many people, the first time, if they haven't seen them in cup competition, a chance for a lot of the more regular Irish League fans to kind of see what this Portadown side is all about. It's much changed since they were in the Premiership, and they've seen them win a lot in the Cup, perhaps have a more shaky affair in the League. They haven't had the best run-in coming up to that game on Friday. In turn, though, they were going against a Cliftonville side who were pretty much on their worst run of the season so far. Down at Shamrock, could the grass play a role in that, or were Portadown going to be overrun by one of the best teams in the league? Mark, it ended up being 2-0 to Cliftonville, but you got to give it to Portadown. Like, give the Reds a good go.
Definitely. Up until that first goal, I'm not sure there would have been many Cliftonville fans would have been totally confident that they were going to walk out of Shamrock on Friday night themselves in the hat for the next round of the Cup. And I tell you what, it was a very, very unfortunate own goal. I thought a wee small mistake can just totally change a game. I thought Portadown were okay. I didn't think it was their best performance from what I've seen as well this year. I've seen a couple of times in the cup and stuff, especially in that game against Glenavon, Albert Mourneview. Just unfortunate for them. I think the quality of that Cliftonville side really did sort of shine through near the end after the first goal. First loss in the cup competitions, being the quarter final of the Irish Cup, certainly can't complain.
The dream of the quadruple is over, Johnny. Were you disappointed in the end on Friday, or were you pleased by what you saw?
It was sort of mixed emotions. Listen, I went into the game, Cliftonville, or I think Niall had said in some of his interviews, one of the most elite teams in the country. They're sitting third, have run Linfield and Larne close up until the past couple of weeks. They're a great football inside. Portadown have a horrible record against Cliftonville. I think that was possibly our 23rd game against them without a win. I think last time we beat Cliftonville was in Solitude in 2014, and I think the last time we beat them at Shamrock was possibly around 2011. Tell you how long ago it was. Alan Cawley scored one of the goals for Portadown. Any game that Portadown go up against Cliftonville, you're never really that confident. Never mind being where Portadown are at the minute and where Cliftonville are at. We were Portadown were without Dougie Wilson was suspended, which was a big loss. Gareth Buchanan was injured in the warm-up. Jack Henderson suspended. A couple of players out there, big players out for Portadown, but I was more than happy with the Portadown performance. I thought we were competitive. We asked questions of Cliftonville. We hit the post in the first half, and we looked dangerous on the break. I think Zach Barr had a great chance. He was maybe one-on-one with the keeper, but he was under pressure a wee bit and maybe took the shot a wee bit early at the edge of the 18-yard box. But as Mark alluded there, it's just wee small things. Cliftonville's 2 goals come from individual errors from Portadown. The first goal, Luke's own goal, I'm not sure. Did he get a call from the keeper? Maybe does it need to be better communication there? I don't think there's really anything he can do about it. If he hasn't got a call from his keeper, he needs to deal with it. And unfortunately, it's went into the net. And then he slipped once and then sort of gathered himself, but then slipped again. And Cliftonville capitalised on that. But I was more than pleased with the Portadown performance. I thought it was competitive. We asked questions of Cliftonville, and I don't think any Portadown supporter could have asked any more of Portadown on Friday night.
For a championship side to overrun one of the top teams in the country, they're going to have to ride their luck, and those little mistakes which led to the goals for Cliftonville, you kind of can't make them. You can't give them those opportunities, and you saw that when those little bit of light in the doorway was given to them, they latched onto them and they delivered them, or the mistake gave them the chance. And it came at such a cruel time for Portadown, because I felt as though they rode the wave a lot with what looked a bit of a sparky Cliftonville side, and just as that goal went in, it looked as though that Cliftonville side were slightly tiring and Portadown were starting to come out of the shell a bit more. They were feeling more confident. They had been able to hold off this fierce attacking side of Cliftonville for the first half, and now it was their time to assert themselves on the game. And I wonder if that goal hadn't have went in, would Portadown have been able to take the game by the scruff of the neck more, and maybe impose themselves and get their own goal. There was chances for each side. There was hitting of the post for both sides in the first half. One moment which I'm keen to ask yourself, Mark, about is if you saw it in the second half. I think it was before the goal was scored. Chris Rogers goes down and Lee Chapman has the ball for Portadown, and he looks to be knocking the ball out due to an injury. And as he attempted to do that, the ball was intercepted from him and then passed on to Ronan Hale, who then went on and tried to score himself. Actually released a wicked shot that hit the post. Was that a bit cheeky, or are you giving Hale the benefit of the doubt that he didn't know what the situation was?
I was very, very keen to see the replay on that. I wasn't sure that it was one of those ones that had bounced on the line, one of those ghost goals that we've seen before in the Irish League. But I'd have been very, very disappointed if that was my team and somebody had scored against us in that manner. Now, if the goal had gone in, we'd be chatting about something completely different. Would have been chatting about a bit of a robbery. But I think it's avoided a massive talking point with that goal just not going over the line. I guess we'll never know whether he knew or not. He's cheeky. He's very unlucky with the shot as well. 2 or 3 inches lower. That's in the back of the net, and Cliftonville are 1-0 up.
Just shows the quality they have, that all they needed was that yard free the ball in front of him and wrap his laces around it. It was very, very impressive. And there's a number of chances throughout that game where he was rushing on in the first half and he was falling over and he knocked the ball with his right boot as he was coming over. And I mean, if it wasn't for Hogg and the Portadown goal, that would have been a goal for themselves as well. So for yourself, Jonny, was there indignation at Shamrock Park at that moment? Or
I thought so, because I think Lee Chapman made it very obvious that he was kicking the ball out because Chris Rogers were down. I even think, from memory, could be wrong, but I think Lee Chapman puts his hand up to the Cliftonville. There's a Cliftonville player close beside him, and I think Lee Chapman puts his hand up to say, listen, I'm knocking the ball out, Chris Rogers is down. So, for me, I think there was no doubt at all that the Cliftonville, especially a player that was beside Lee Chapman, knew that he was putting the ball out for Chris Rogers to be treated. I think, as Mark has alluded there to, I think there would have been a real kick up if the goal had went in, to be fair. And I also thought it was very close. I don't know if it bounces on the line, but it must be very, very close to going in. I think it was, personally, I think it was cheeky.
Well, in the end, it was 2-0 to the Reds. Mark, we've seen, particularly after losing to your Linfield there at Solitude, Cliftonville's season was potentially shaking, and not getting a win there at Shamrock Park would have taken the season almost completely off the rails. They'll not really care about how the victory came about. They got it. I thought actually Sam Ashford was quite impressive. He's a player that really puts himself about in that game, and that they'll look to build on him for the rest of the season. They're in the semi-finals. They'll not care and hope this will be the spark to push them forward and really finish this season with aplomb.
And by all accounts, I don't think they're out of the league race yet. I don't think they're totally out of it. They're certainly hanging on the coattails of both Linfield and Larne. I mean, it's a side that have been totally, in control of their own destiny up until the last 2 or 3 games. That tricky little Dungannon side, of course, getting another win against them this year. They also beat them in the League Cup down at Stanmore Park. They just seem to have Cliftonville's number. But I think certainly that game that was up at Solitude a couple of Tuesday nights ago, where Linfield beat them 3-0, I don't think I'd seen Cliftonville as poor all season. Now, it took a lot for, I'm sure, Jim Magilton to get round his players and say for Friday night that this is our last hope here of continuing this season, because if that game had finished in the way that Portadown would have wanted, it could have been a real downward spiral for them. 3 on the bounce is not something that happens at Cliftonville. 3 losses on the bounce, that is, sorry. Certainly not this season. And I think Magilton's done well to actually get them out of that potentially tricky game down at Shamrock Park.
On Saturday, we saw the continuation of the quarterfinals, where the championship faced off against the top 4 sides in the Premiership. It was tenants versus landlords at Inver Park. Larne go against Newington, who were very much feeling themselves after a big win against Portadown, maybe a week and a bit beforehand. In the end, Larne were able to win out quite comfortably with all the players that they have. But if there's a little consolidation trophy, it is for Newington. They're the first team to score against Larne this calendar year. Came late on, but they'll take it.
I think it sets up great semi-finals there, doesn't it? Linfield now will play Glentoran in the semi-final, and it's Larne against Cliftonville. The results were all expected, really, didn't we? We expected the 4 Premiership teams to go through, and Portadown maybe people's most outside bets for causing a shock, but it teases up lovely for those semi-finals, especially that Big 2 semi-final. It's a great finale to the end of the season, with the league title looking like it's probably going to go to the wire as well.
For Glentoran, if their season was going to come off as at least somewhat remarkable, I mean, losing against Ballyclare would have been another one of those disaster moments, but they were able to score the goals to win out, despite, I mean, is that James Singleton chance maybe the miss of the season as he was rushing onto it in the box? I'm sure he'll blame that bobbly pitch at the Oval, but as you said, Jonny, big wins pretty much for everybody. And on the Cliftonville Larne side, I mean, that's an interesting pairing this year. Those two, there's obviously so much recent history between them two because of all the players leaving and going to Larne, and so much of Larne's success being built on former Cliftonville players, and that's obviously continued all the way into the January transfer window. I mean, if there's one of those players recently who have really come to the fore for Larne, It's Levi Ives. He was big on Saturday as well, and I know Cliftonville will feel as though there's a slight hoodoo over them, and Lauren will also feel like a competition that they've never won in the Irish Cup. They were able to win the league this year. I mean, it's a big game whenever that comes for either side, because as much as Lauren look as though they are ascending to the title, both of them have something to prove by getting to the final this year.
Definitely. Of course, Lauren and Cliftonville, as we all know, they've been in the final in recent years. Lauren coming short against Linfield, and Cliftonville being well beaten by Coleraine in their most recent attempt to win the Irish Cup for the first time in, I don't know, 100 years or whatever it is. Portadown, as they showed at half time of the game, did beat Lauren in a final 2005. That's before I even started watching football, to be honest. But
Thanks for making us
listen,
feel old.
no problem, no problem. It feels like it's one of these teams' competition to lose. I think Linfield have struggled in recent games, I must say. Glentoran haven't looked their finest at all moments this season. So I don't know whether maybe I'm being harsh on Linfield after winning, but I just feel that it's going to be it's a very, very tight call for who's going to be lifting the cup this year. But what a semi-final pairing we have! Like, who knows? Was that organised? Was it?
Well, after what probably didn't feel like the most dramatic set of quarterfinals, we now have big time, big drama semis. These will be a month away from now, and the season will be at peak boiling point temperature, and then all four of these teams who will be facing off against each other. I mean, this will be, whenever this game comes around, there will be a Cliftonville-Lauren game in between this semi, I believe, and then they've also got to play post-split, so they'll get well used to each other again, and on a neutral venue wherever it gets played. It's anyone's game, but you've got to fancy Lauren just based on where they are this season, and it feels as though perhaps maybe Cliftonville are running out of puff. For Glentoran, they'll obviously be delighted to get through. They'll be aiming for a cup to make this season feel a bit more sweeter. Out of all of those other three teams, I think they'll probably prefer to take on Linfield just because they've had the run of them more recently, and those games in the Bell Classico, it can really go either way, especially on a semi-final occasion.
Yeah, I was very, very excited when I did hear the draw. It's an excellent draw. Now it's one that I wouldn't have wanted for the final, because my goodness, what a game that would have been. And I'm sure my nerves are going to be shot anyway, regardless. But in a cup final, it would have been even worse. But I think, as you say, Peter, I think the Glens are going to be happy enough for that draw. Out of those four teams, are Glentoran possibly the underdogs out of the four? I would say so. But the way they've played against Linfield this season, and the way Linfield have sometimes failed to turn up against them, would definitely give them some confidence going into the semi-final. But as you say, it could all change before then. Things could be completely different. There's so much football to play before now and then.
It truly is. And of course, Linfield getting to that semi-final, they were able to dispatch the fourth and final championship side in Institute up at the Brandywell. So it sets Linfield up well now that they are still in the title race after that big week they had last week. They're still in the cup. So, everything should be calm. And of course, when everything is somewhat calm on the pitch, there seems to be more troubled waters off of it. I mean, I tweeted a reaction to this story from the Belfast Telegraph in the middle of last week, and I got a lot of people talking, so I'll put it. It's an interesting point talking to you guys. I don't think it's a right or a wrong, but I think it also is an interesting insight to how fans view players and what they're worth compared to what the realities of clubs and budgets and all the rest. I've said in here before, look, I'm always pro player, get the money, go for it. But there was a quote from an article in the Belfast Telegraph where David Healy is suggesting that Chris McKee, who is going to be out of contract at the end of the season, I believe, 21-year-old striker, had a real hot start to the season. Injuries somewhat curtailed that slightly. That, don't move on, don't waste this, Linfield career that you potentially have for, £150 a week. What was the total that was being mooted? Which, again, doesn't sound so much. Why would you throw this away for £150? But again, if that's a contract which is across 52 weeks, and I don't know if it is or not, I mean, that's the guts of £8,000. If would you move job to do maybe the same job or something similar for £8,000 a year more? I think we all might, even if we absolutely love where we are. I mean, that's a substantial thing, in a lot of areas of business or work. The main way to go up the pay scale, go up the progression ladder in regards to title, you gotta move about. Maybe that's there, maybe that's not. So what was the sentiment, Mark, with the idea that Chris McKee is looking for as much money as he is worth, and the idea that maybe he should take some form of a pay cut, not knowing how much he earns, a wee slight little wee nugget off, so he can play for his beloved Linfield.
First and foremost, I think Chris has been a really, really good player for us. I think he hasn't really hit the form that we know that he can this year. I think, as you said, injuries and we sort of small issues have meant that he's not able to grasp that striker position and make it his own and sort of have a consistent role within the squad and within the team. I just don't know where his head's at the minute, though. If he loves the club so much and if he's a boyhood fan and all this, that's obviously going to be there. But I think in his head, he's a young guy and a wee bit more money. It's very, very tempting. And if he can get that elsewhere, I can see why he would want to maybe move on, because he's certainly not had enough sort of luck at Linfield, if you know what I mean. But in order to get that pay increase at Linfield, he has to I'd say he has to prove himself a wee bit more, in every area in life. I think if I'm walking into a manager or a boss and saying, can I have a pay rise? I'd say the manager would be asking, how do you prove it? Can you justify your pay rise? And can Chris McKee justify an increase in wage based on this season's performance? I wouldn't say yes at the minute.
We often talk about how we're in this new era of Irish League football, and with that we've seen full-time football for some teams, and we've heard many managers talk about this issue of wages increasing and not being able to have the budget to cover it. I mean, Jonny, from the circles that you're around or just being in the game, are you hearing this coming around, that perhaps wage demands from players is increasing at an unsustainable rate?
It is a difficult one. Sometimes the world of football is a completely different kettle of fish compared to the rest of real life. Sometimes I feel we were saying there, playing for your boyhood team is £150. Is it that big of a deal? In a normal way of life for anybody that's working, a job in real life, that's a massive thing. An extra week. But sometimes in football, as supporters, we think, sure, that's nothing. Sure, why doesn't he? It's only £150. Sometimes football isn't logical from if somebody's looking at it outside. I always remember Don Kelly. Used to say this at Portadown. He always used to say, when your football career's over, you don't tell people about how much money you earn. You show them how many medals you won. And I think playing for your boyhood team, winning trophies and medals means far more than winning those trophies and medals somewhere else. But I do think with wages and stuff, that the full-time, part-time thing is having a bit of an impact, that sort of filtering down the league and so forth.
It's something that continues to rumble on. If that wasn't something that was catching people's attention last week, we saw over the weekend that following incidents at the Coleraine game between Coleraine and Linfield on the 16th of February, the IFA Disciplinary Committee has imposed some sanctions on Linfield. They made a big statement there on Saturday night addressing some of these. They don't dispute what occurred at Coleraine, and of course what they're referring to, if anybody saw particularly the start of the second half, there was a number of flares set off as part of a display that then delayed the kickoff of the second half. And from that, I mean, Linfield unfortunately have had to face a number of sanctions from the IFA Disciplinary Committee over the past couple of seasons. Some of them have been relating to displays like this. Some of them have been connected to sectarian singing, which has been reported. And over the past couple of years, the fans group Blue Unity has drawn a lot of attention for what they add to the atmosphere at Linfield games. But now this has been a big statement from Linfield, because in the statement they made on Saturday night, and I'm quoting this, Blue Unity are now not welcome at Windsor Park or at any away games. They do not represent Linfield Football Club and are proud traditions of sportsmanship and fair play. We no longer attempt to engage with them on any basis. We have worked with the Police Service of Northern Ireland and spent in the region of £100,000 each season on private security costs. This has not worked. We have constructed social media campaigns, video messaging, and have asked restorative justice practitioners to intervene. This has not worked. We will continue to work closely with the PSNI to identify those involved in this reprehensible behaviour, and hopefully prosecutions and lifetime football bans will follow. That is a big statement to make from a football club, they've got their crosshairs clearly focused on those connected with Blue Unity. They're a fans group. They're obviously a collection of individuals. Mark, you're there on a weekly basis at Linfield games. Was this surprising to hear such bold words from the club?
First of all, you've picked a great week for me to be on this podcast. You really have. You had me
But weeks
booked.
ago,
You had me booked a long time ago when this League Cup final was confirmed, and Linfield have provided a powerful lot of content for this podcast. So listen, you say I'm there every week, and that's something that I can't say for this so-called fan group. They like to turn up for certain games against Larne and Cliftonville and Glentoran, but when you're playing Ballymena at home on a Tuesday night in the County Antrim Shield, they're usually nowhere to be seen. The likes of games against Newry and stuff at home, they don't tend to turn up for either. But big away days, where they can sort of make a bit of noise and make a bit of a scene, they tend to turn up for those. So we've just talked about Chris McKee, how much money he's looking. I would suggest that if this certain fan group, so-called fan group, as we have said, had not begun this sort of anti-board campaign that they're going after, we wouldn't have to worry about the £8,000 a year, because we wouldn't have been fined it. This group have created certain numbers of fines on the club over the past year and a half, maybe even longer. And it's so much money that could have been spent in better ways and other ways, that you're now just having to, pay up to cover for the actions of a few fans. So I think if they had any common sense, they'd maybe realise that the club wouldn't have any issues with finances or anything. I'm not saying there's issues with finances at Linfield. I think everybody knows that qualification.
It's money though.
Oh, it's money wasted. It's money wasted.
We've seen fines that 3,000 was the most recent one as a part of this sanctions now by the disciplinary committee. They're going to see, and this is the most significant. We've seen them before, and they've been pulled back, and now the West Stand's going to be closed for the game against Newry on the 16th of March, and then 2 home post-split fixtures, full stadium ban for Linfield. This isn't just people that they have found and have pointed out saying you have sang sectarian songs, you have lit flares or illegal fireworks, whatever. It is everybody. So the actions of a small group is impacting everybody. Then that's match revenue, and I mean post-split games at home. They are significant from an income point of view, and they're also significant from an on-the-field point of view. And I'm sure that's what the most frustrating thing is from everybody involved in Linfield, that it's this group that they claim they've tried to engage with, and they obviously feel as though they have perpetrated or contributed to these fines and to these issues, that now yourself, Mark, and other Linfield fans aren't going to be able to go to what could be and will be crunch games going in to the end of the season. Of course, when you ban a group called Blue Unity, what is that? They're not walking around with t-shirts, whatever. They're not, they have had banners, and clearly a banner will get you removed, I imagine. But do they have names? Do they have people? Can they single them out? It's up to the club to decide that. But I mean, this is a massive story, and how it is then rolled out will obviously draw a lot of attention, because it's significant. They're talking about lifetime bans here.
Yeah, and I think the club are well within their rights to sort of issue those, because let's be quite honest, we saw during COVID, and it's that old cliche and it's that old nonsense statement sometimes it's given out. Football without fans is nothing. What on earth are Linfield? What's the point in Linfield playing a home game in the split when we're not going to have any fans? There's going to be only Larne fans and only Cliftonville fans in the stadium. So these guys have shot not just themselves in the foot, they've shot the whole club in the foot. And if this is the club that they love so much and they support so much, they've almost, single-handedly written off 2 home advantages against 2 of the biggest teams in the league. A couple of weeks ago, I was sitting at a match at halftime trying to work out who we were playing at home in the split. And it obviously worked out. It was Larne and Cliftonville and Coleraine. So we're now only going to have one of the 3 home games in the split will have Linfield fans present. And listen, I just don't know where it goes from there. I don't know whether it's going to be, is there an appeal process? Is there something that can be done? I think it's sort of too far gone now. And I think the IFA have sort of put their foot down and said, listen, enough's enough on that side of things. When it comes to the banning of fans, I think it's a big statement that when Linfield have said that they're working alongside the PSNI to try and actually work out who these people are. And for the sake of the club and the sake of the success on the pitch, it's going to have to be sorted out sooner rather than later, because it's only adding to more problems at the club that they don't need.
You make a key point here, Mark, that a lot of these offences are entangled with the rule of law. And look, Linfield are the club that are making the statement about the fan group Blue Unity. I'm not here to report that I've seen or attribute any actions by them. But, John, I want to bring you in here because from this then there's been a further discussion online about the idea of fan culture in the Irish League and the idea of atmosphere in the Irish League, and about how what this fans group in Blue Unity were doing is they were bringing atmosphere, and now they're being curtailed, and this is now putting off young fans who want to create an atmosphere and help grow the league. I mean, your club, Portadown, they have their own fans group. We all saw banners there on Friday night. I'm sure we'll see plenty of banners and displays coming up at this cup final on Sunday. The key thing here is that you can make banners as fans. You can be a fans group. You can sing songs that are pro your team and are against the other team, right? But the line that's here is atmosphere good. Where the line is crossed, where you are going beyond just being a fans group and you are then breaking laws, is when you are chanting things that are considered sectarian. And also, I know we're probably pointing out, look at, the Siberian League or whatever and their amazing displays and their flares. I mean, regardless of what you think about it, flares are banned. They're pyrotechnic. That's the way it is. And you're just going to have to create an atmosphere without that. It's simple, really, isn't it, Johnny? Regardless if you like it or not.
I think we'll all agree here that everybody wants the best atmosphere possible at an Irish League game, but it has to be done in the correct way. I know from a Portadown point of view, we have the Red Terrace, and I know that the board, some of the directors in the club have had an open communication, have had meetings with these lads, who sat down with them and had great dialogue and told them, listen, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. And the lads have been brilliant. I think they've at Shamrock Park or Portadown games have created a great atmosphere. They've got behind the team in the right way. They understand that, for instance, in the issue of flares, they understand that they light off a flare. It's not them that suffers, it's the club that suffers. It's one thing, Linfield with these big fines, and I'm sure, that's money that can be spent in far better ways at Linfield Football Club. But the likes of a Linfield or a Larne, their finances, you would imagine, are superior to most in the league. And it hits them hard as well. So you can imagine if a team in the championship or the bottom six or whatever it is getting hit with these fines, how much it impacts those clubs. Portadown couldn't afford to be paying fines left, right and centre for things like that. And the lads in the Red Terrace that the club have had an open dialogue with, like I say, a great bunch of fellas, and we've met them in the club and have said, listen, we'll back you, we'll support you with what you need and things like that, but this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, and this is the way things are. And they fully have embraced that, took that on board, and have been great with that. And there's self-policing goes on there as well, I think is important. Those lads have been, they spread that word, listen, can't be letting off flares, because if you let off flares, it costs the club money. And everybody at Portadown is on board with that, knows that. But there's only so much you can do as well, Peter, in respect to Linfield there. I sometimes feel it can be a wee bit unfair on clubs as well, getting hit with the fines. I don't have a better idea of how to handle it, but if the club have done all that they can to try and stop this, what more can they do at times? You can ban people from a ground, you can make your feelings known and try and tell people what's right and what's wrong. But if some individual decides at a match to do this and the club is getting hit in the pocket continuously, sometimes it does feel a tad unfair, but I don't have a better idea of how they go about making it a real deterrent.
As we said there, this is not a one-off. This is not a first-time sanction that's come Linfield's way in recent history. This is their decision now to move forward with it. We're now going to have to sit back and see what result this action by the club will have. Irish League Cup final coming your way this Sunday. You may get the Mother's Day cards in early, because if you're a Portadown or a Linfield fan, you'll be going straight to Windsor Park, probably early, to take in everything that comes with a cup final. Both teams come in after a bit of a shaky couple of weeks, but a couple of high points as well. I mean, the story really going into this final is clearly Portadown. They got relegated last year. They then have to rebuild this side. They've had a not so a stellar league campaign, but up until Friday they were undefeated in cup competition. They won their regional cup. They've beaten a lot of top flight teams in, was it Glenavon, Crusaders, Loughgall twice, Dungannon. I mean, Cliftonville could have been the latest one there, and they go into this with really nothing to lose and a chance at history for them. Of course, the last time they won this competition, they were a championship side, so that would be a story in itself. But Jonny, you talked there on Friday night of the fact that you were pleased despite the loss. I know you'll be going into this game going, Linfield are the favourites, they've got all the players, but you'll have a sneaky little notion in your head thinking, if we play up to our ability, we could do this on Sunday. There's belief in this side despite the odds being not in their favour.
No, there's definitely belief. So there is, and I think arguably Portadown have maybe beaten more Premiership teams this season in the Championship than we beat last season when we were in the Premiership. On our day, as we've shown against Glenavon, as we've shown against Carrick Rangers, as we've shown against Crusaders, Dungannon, Swifts, Loughgall, on our day, we are more than a match for anybody. I think sometimes this season, being the underdog has suited Portadown better. So I think, we're going at this, we're well aware. Listen, I've seen Portadown teams going for Premier League titles and Irish League titles get beat by Linfield in cup finals, so nobody is underestimating the task that is ahead of Portadown on Sunday. I think if you ask any Portadown supporter, however, they would arguably give up Sunday for promotion. But we're just glad to be there. I remember me and Dave Wiggins would used to have frequent chats of, do you ever think we'll ever see Portadown in a major cup final again? Only last year we used to chat about this, we used to think we would be in an old people's home by the time we would see Portadown in a major cup final again. And we're just pleased to be there. I think if there is a fan base that deserves a day out, it's the Portadown fan base. I don't know of another club in the last 9 years that has went through as much up and downs as Portadown, going back to that 2015 Irish Cup final where they Glentoran at Windsor, it's moved to the Oval. You were a couple of strange decisions. You've suffered 2 relegations. You're up again. There's just been a whole lot has happened at Portadown and the fan base over the last decade or so. So I think it's just marvellous for the supporters to have a day out, to enjoy the occasion, be the underdogs. There's no pressure in Portadown. All the pressure, I think, is on Linfield. So we'll embrace it, enjoy it, and just counting down the days.
Mark, do you enjoy this position? I know Linfield are commonly the baddies. They're always against underdogs, but I mean, they go into this cup final. They won out last year against Coleraine, and there is pressure on Linfield just because they looked potentially that we're going to throw away their surge at the league title. They've pulled that back, and I mean, if Portadown lose 4-0, people go, well, there you go, who cares? But I mean, if Portadown somehow sneak this, maybe, is it panic stations at Windsor Park? You go into this game with a couple of big injuries, but you'll feel confident going into this game. But does it irk you slightly that losing to Coleraine wouldn't be nice, but losing to Portadown, that's not a nice feeling?
It's one of those ones. I think you're right. Pressure-wise, Linfield, Linfield win. It's as you say, it's sort of boring. Linfield have won another cup, and that's Linfield win something again. But equally, we can't really be seen to be losing. We've sort of hemmed and hawed about the League Cup. It's always been sort of up until the semi-final stage. You're sort of going, well, Tuesday night, right? I may as well go with nothing else on, sort of thing. When it gets to the final and semi-final, it's a competition that you start believing that you can actually win, and it's another piece of silverware on what has been a very, very successful managerial career of David Healy at the club. I just know on our day we can be very, very good and beat Cliftonville 3-0 at Solitude. That's great. There's also this sort of performance in us which has come out more recently where we can play very, very poorly. That game we were talking about against Coleraine, lose 3-0 one week and then 5 days later win 3-0. So there's that performance in us. Dungannon, certainly in the semi-final, and games this season, I feel have been one of the teams that, have been able to jump on those sort of bad areas in the Linfield performance. And if it worst comes to worst, I would say Portadown would be able to do that as well. For me, it's a 50-50 final, it's always a 50-50 final. But on our day, we could win 3-0, no problem. On our day, we could also lose 3-0.
Linfield have been able to really rise to the occasion in the big games this season. That was something that they lacked last year, and they were so good against the bottom six sides. And in fact, you see all those poor results that Linfield have had. It has been against Dungannon or Carrick. Those have been the games that have given you more trouble, and I imagine that's what Portadown will want to try and latch on to. Potentially that feeling of lethargy, that this is just another cup final and we're going to beat this championship team, no problem. Because I mean, if Portadown win this cup, will there be a cow milked in Tandergee for the next week? It'll be a completely different energy compared to Linfield, and I'm sure Niall will want to try and instill that in his team. Johnny, a lot of people will know about this Linfield team. We'll get into who would likely be available. Some people will get an insight into the team there on Friday. What is this Portadown team going to look like? I thought Gary Thompson, who people might know, was quite impressive there in that game against Cliftonville. We've all heard about Zach Barr being this goal scorer coming for them. I guess with it being the League Cup, is there a few players where of all those January additions won't be able to make it due to cup tie? Dougie Wilson coming back. Who's this starting 11 people are going to have to look out for?
Well, I'm trying to think now. I know there is a couple of the January signings will be unavailable. I'm thinking TJ Murray, Kieran Dobbin, Jamie Brown, and Jack Henderson. I believe are all cup tied. I'm not sure. We're seeing Chris Rogers come off there on Friday evening. It would be a real bolt from the blue if Chris Rogers was in the squad. We all thought his season was over. He has an ACL tear, but he has sort of rose from the ashes and came in on Friday evening, and I thought played very well. I believe now he maybe just panicked a wee bit when he went down, and maybe it was more of a mental thing, a psychological thing, and the injury maybe isn't as bad as first feared. The one thing about this Portadown team is, I look through it, and maybe more than most, there's cup final experience throughout that Portadown 11 that's going to be involved.
I saw some of that Dungannon side that won out a couple of years ago.
I think Dougie Wilson, Paul McElroy, and Ryan Mays all played in that Dungannon Swift side that won the League Cup a few years ago. You've also the likes of Aaron Trainer, Ross Redmond there as well, Gary Thompson, of course. So, the Portadown side is riddled with players that have cup final experience, which for a championship side, I suppose is a bit rare. So, you talk about Gary. I thought Gary Thompson, he was the Portadown man of the match on Friday night. I thought he was excellent, and Portadown will need all his experience. Paul McElroy I think started his first game in maybe 4.5 months. He had suffered an injury, I think back in September, October time against Harlan Wolf Welter. So he's sort of just coming back to full fitness. I think he has maybe 2 substitute appearances and then started on Friday night. So I think with those signings that are cup tied, the Portadown 11 possibly for the most part picks itself. I think the goalkeeper selection will be interesting, because I know Gareth Buchanan and Aaron Hogg have sort of been in and out as the season has went on. It seems to be in Gareth Buchanan's case, he has a great game and then seems to get injured immediately after. He made a tremendous double save up at Newington early on in the season, and then injured himself about a minute or two later, and then was out for a couple of weeks. Aaron Hogg came in and done a great job, and then Aaron Hogg, I think, got injured, and then Buchanan last week up at Ballinamallard makes a couple again of brilliant saves that helps Portadown win the 3 points there, and he looks like he's nailed that number 1 spot for a while. Then he gets injured in the warm-up on Friday night, so that'll be an interesting scenario who Niall names as his goalkeeper on Sunday. But I think bar that, I think that the Portadown side almost picks itself, to be honest, on Sunday. Zach Barr, Ryan Mays, Eamon Fife, Gary Thompson. I think the defence will pick itself as well. I think you Dougie Wilson comes in. He was suspended for the Irish Cup. I imagine he'll come straight back into partner Luke Wilson at centre back alongside Aaron Trainer and Lee Chapman. But I think the goalkeeper one will be interesting for Niall on Sunday.
Zach Barr, Paul McElroy, him coming back like at the perfect time. That adds something that I'm sure a lot of teams at the bottom of the Premiership and something Portadown's lacked, and that is potential goals. For Linfield, they on Sunday beat out Institute with a side that still had the likes of Annette and Archer starting, Cooper and McKee and McBrien on the bench. Talk there of Eunice getting stretched off. He might be an injury at the back. What a rock he's been. So, like for Linfield, what could we see happen? Would it be pretty much that team that they played against Institute, or do you think this is the time where the likes of Cooper could come back and maybe start?
We never quite know what the Linfield injury issues are until we turn up on a match day and find out who's on the team sheet and who's starting. Certainly, from what I'm reading about UNE, it seems to have been hamstring issue, which is something that is obviously not going to be, well, most likely not going to be fixed within a week unless something miraculous happens. So who knows? Recently we've been sort of playing 3/5 at the back sort of thing. 3 centre halves and two wing backs has sort of been the scenario, with 3 in the midfield. The 2 up top, of course, being Annett and Fitzpatrick most recently due to McKee's injuries. But listen, we're going to have to find something within us to sort of get over the loss of Eunice. He's probably, as you've said, been one of our best players this season. An unbelievable find. Not one that we were expecting to be so well. I certainly wasn't expecting to be such an integral part of the Linfield team this year. Ben Hall, of course, coming back from injury is a big one. Glad to see him back in the last couple of weeks, as he was very, very solid just before.
And Linfield confirmed the Hall extension as well.
Yeah, good to see. Finally, some good news from Linfield. Also, Chris John's getting a nice contract extension, which is good. He's probably been.
I just wanted to say Hall extension.
That's poor now. Anyway, UNE East, of course, being one of the better players this year. Listen, we're going to miss him, but we're just going to have to try and work something out. I don't know who's going to play as our third centre half. McGee has sort of come in and played about every position apart from goalkeeper for Linfield at the minute, but I would say he might be cup tied with the Dungannon sort of thing. I guess we'll find out if he's on the team sheet or not on Saturday or Sunday.
That would be a massive win for Portadown, because I mean, what a player! Out of all the complaining about the lack of adding players, he's a star. McGee, my goodness, he's just so. He's focused on the ball. He can attack people one-on-one. He connects everything up. He doesn't look flustered at all. I mean, he has it all, really.
He, in the nicest terms, he looks like a player who has come back from like League One or something, as opposed to made a step up from a bottom 6 Irish league club. I'm not saying that Dungannon are a terrible team or anything, but you know what I mean? They're this sort of historic, bottom 6 side in the Premiership. But he looks like a player who was,
the step up suits him. It's like, oh yeah, we're perfect.
Yeah, the step up does. He looks like he's played at that level for years. He came in and there was no sort of teething problems. He just fitted in really, really well straight away. I think his performance against Cliftonville was unbelievable. I think that's what I'm going back to, because it was so evident how keen he was to get on the ball and how confident he was every time he was in possession. He was sort of doing things that you weren't expecting a right winger to be doing. As a fullback, he was playing cheeky passes and nutmegs and stuff, which is very enjoyable, especially when you're 3-0 up away at Solitude. So, listen, if he's cup tied, we're going to be in a bit of bother as to who's going to be playing that fullback position, or wing back, I suppose. Will we see Kirk Miller floating into that role again, as he's had to do from time to time, to sort of cover for missing players? But listen, who knows? It's a lottery really as to who we're going to have available at the minute.
For dramatic sake, I am trying to hype up all these players that are missing from Linfield, and look at all these, potential experienced stars that Portadown have going into it. No doubt, being played at Windsor, that'll benefit Linfield. The big, wider pitch. There's been lots of discussions about sizes of pitches over the past 2 weeks, but that will benefit Linfield. They know how to play there. They'll know how to set themselves up. It isn't exactly that same feeling that sometimes they have when they're playing against the lower side of fans checking their watch, going, why have Linfield not scored yet? What is going on here? There's a different kind of atmosphere where Linfield can play a different kind of game and really try to control the match. I mean, if we're comparing the Friday night game to this, I mean, Portadown were able to marshal some of the attacking threats that Cliftonville have quite well, I thought, and they'll try to take that experience into this game against Linfield. If we're talking about keys to victory, with Portadown being the one that probably has a more limited variety of them, I mean, it's not conceding early. That's a team that will not want to try and chase the game. They don't think they have the players to do that. And they'll want to try and score and hold on and just not be flustered by the occasion, because what Linfield have is players that can beat them one-on-one with Miller and Cooper if they come back on. I mean, Fitzpatrick is that player who the ball gets pumped up to him. It could go anywhere. He can pick that out of the sky and he can turn on a dime and whack it in from a nothing chance. So, that's the real... It's a bit like that game against Cliftonville. It's trying to play a mistake-free football and capitalise on your breakaways and maybe try and entice Linfield out of their deep defence and try and use whoever it may be, Fife, Mace, out wide and attack and hurt and maybe get something from a set piece. For Linfield, I mean, there's so many avenues. The problem, I think, with Linfield is that sometimes when you have a team like what Portadown will do, where you aim to frustrate and aim to try and force Linfield to try and unlock them, that isn't exactly top of the skill tree of Linfield. They don't have as many players that can unlock this low block that I'm sure Portadown will try and instill. So, I mean, it could just be a frustrating 30, 50, 60 minutes of just balls being lumped in and whoever it is, Dougie Wilson, knocking them back. And as long as that game goes on, it'll benefit them. But I think what we saw, that for Linfield, it's keeping calm, using the skill and ability, and try to really use that professional status to your ability and outwork this Portadown side, because there was gaps on Friday night that I'm sure Linfield will think we can exploit. The thing is, though, they do not have the rapid speed of Hale and of Ashford and what they have out wide. So, I mean, for you, Mark, is that the aim? Get the goal early and hope the Portadown capitulate, trying to go for an equaliser?
I think in any game against sort of a lesser side, a lower placed side in the league, that's always got to be the sort of the game plan for the Blues. Now, we say go ahead early. There's games this year where we've gone ahead early and sort of took the foot off the gas, so to speak. There's been games where we've gone ahead nearly too early and ended up, being very lethargic in games and sort of chasing the game near the end. One that springs to mind has been the Dungannon game. And we did go ahead very early in that one at Windsor, and we were 3-1 down before half time. So it's going to be a tough game. I don't think that anybody at Linfield is going to go into this game and say, this is just a case of see how many we can score. From what I've seen from the Ports this year, as I said earlier, Friday night they seemed to defend pretty well in spells. Of course, the goal was just a complete nightmare of miscommunication error between the goalkeeper and defender. That can happen. But again, against Glenavon in the semi-final, from the highlights that I saw, it seemed to be a game where Portadown didn't really, they weren't running forward, they weren't, it wasn't a case of they scored one and it could have been five sort of thing. They got their goal and they defended well, and they made it difficult for Dungannon. I can't speak for every game of Portadown's this year, because not every game's going to be like that. When they're in the league, they're the team that everybody wants to beat. They're the Linfield of that championship. They're the ones that everybody's eyeing up and saying, I'd love to beat Portadown this weekend. So they're going to have to play a very different style of football compared to their league campaign. But listen, I honestly, I think it's 50-50, to be totally honest.
Wow. Score prediction?
Oh, anything but like extra time and penalties. I couldn't deal with that. I hate watching. I love watching penalties, but not when it's Linfield, because we never win a penalty shootout. I'll try and stick by my team. 2-1 Blues, hopefully.
That's the way to win it, Johnny, on penalties for the Ports, yep.
Any way to win it, Peter? I will take any watch way to win it. If it's a Brutal game of football, but Portadown win 1-0 with a 90th minute own goal or whatever it is. I'll take it.
As Kirk Miller tried to kick the ball out of touch because there was Ewan East injured on the side. Don't care. Portadown are like, whatever, I didn't see him.
Yeah, listen, looking forward to it. I think that you have all alluded to there, it's no pressure on Portadown. Linfield's at home. Linfield's the best team in the country, arguably the best team in the island. Nobody expects Portadown to get anything out of this. But Portadown, if they are to get anything out of it, they're going to have to be disciplined. They're going to have to frustrate Linfield, possibly as the game goes on. Stay in the game for as long as possible. Possibly with the game being at Windsor, you might get a chance as the game goes on and it's 0-0, maybe the Linfield supporters start to get a bit touchy, and that suits Portadown. Portadown, as we've said earlier on as well, have vast cup final experience within their squad. They need to call on all of that and more on Sunday. The club's main aim though is promotion, and I think if you asked any Portadown supporter, do you want to win the League Cup or do you want promoted this season, I think everybody would choose the latter and would want promotion. But Linfield's a team filled with quality all over the park, no matter if they're missing a Chris Shields or Chris McKee or whatever, and they have the quality then to bring in players to replace those players. So it promises to be a great occasion, and as I say, I don't think there's a more worthy fan base of a fun day than Portadown's.
I will say, maybe, I'm sorry to do it to you Portadown fans, but I think this will be a 3-1 on Sunday. I think it will be close enough early on, maybe a few goals, and I think it'll ultimately be later on where Linfield put the icing on the cake to make it 3-1. So you get your goal, but perhaps based on my recent predictions, Portadown fans will be delighted that I'm predicting a 3-1 win for Linfield. Jonny, before we very briefly go through the other games that will be happening this weekend, I've only talked in spells this season just about the championship. Obviously, you've been seeing it week in and week out with Portadown against the other teams. I imagine as a Portadown man, it hasn't really went the way that you've wanted. But look, right now you've got, 9-10 games to go. I'm sure you'll want to say you're confident you have a bit of belief, but I mean, do you back them now to try and pull back this Dundela team and win out, or would you take second right now?
No, listen, I back my team. The aim for the club and for the team at the start of the season was to win the championship, and I still think that we're capable of doing that. It's a tough league. I wish I didn't have as much experience of the championship as I do, but unfortunately I do. And people talk about the Premiership and with the Linfields and Glentorns and so forth. Sometimes I look at the Premiership and really, realistically, is anybody outside of Linfield or Larne going to win the league for the next couple of years? Personally, I don't think so. I think it's between one or the other, and I think it'll be like that for the foreseeable. I think you look at the Championship, and sometimes I think you look 4 or 5 teams are more than capable of winning that league. And I think sometimes with the Premiership, you can predict the results normally fairly confidently on a week-to-week basis. While in the Championship, I think it was Ards 1 week beat Dundela 4-0, and then the next week go and lose at Knockbreda. It's just mad.
I'm sure you wish you could have predicted every Portadown result this season.
I know. But listen, I think if Portadown can stay in contention to the split, I'm looking at the teams in the top 6, and from the way it stands, I think Portadown would have the bulk of the games at home in the top 6, with possibly only having I don't mean that by only, but they would have to go to Bangor, and I think the rest of the games could possibly be at home, which would be a big plus for Portadown. But we need to stay in contention, as I said earlier on as well. I think sometimes Portadown's issue maybe this year is they're more suited to being the underdogs, is maybe why they've done well in the cup competitions when they've come up against the Premiership big boys, while whenever they're so-called favourites in almost every championship game that they played, that sometimes that can be an issue for them. It also, teams come and they just come to frustrate Portadown, and that has proven difficult for Portadown at times to break down. We've also arguably our 2 biggest signings. I know Paul McElroy arrived in the January transfer window, but we were without Paul McElroy for about 4.5 months, and Dougie Wilson missed the first 3 or 4 months of the season as well, which have been big blows to Portadown. But I'll back my team, and I think that they can get over the line, and I hope they do.
Well, I will keep anybody that listens to this podcast and doesn't keep an eye on the championship. It is an interesting race this year, and I will be giving a little bit of a reflection on whatever happens between all those sides. Currently, Institute, Portadown, Bangor, and Dundela all fighting for the trophy. I'm not going to say promotion because by reporting that doesn't seem to be what everyone's fighting for. But look, they want to win the league, and we'll see what way it goes down. For fans that have listened through all of this and don't follow any of the teams that are in Irish Cup or League Cup action, this is the point you may have been waiting for. We'll skim through some of the results or some of the games that'll be happening on Saturday as they warm up for the League Cup final on Sunday. Ballymena, Cruise. I mean, Ballymena are hoping to get any kind of result anywhere. Crusaders is maybe the one team you'd want to play against in the top six, maybe?
Certainly haven't been going very well this season compared to, what maybe Stephen Baxter had expected in his swan song up at Seaview. But listen, I think it's, as all games are at this stage of the season, it's a must win for Ballymena United, isn't it? Really, away there for the Cruise. Has it ever been an easy place to go? No. But this year it's probably going to be, a game that Cruise, despite their form, are going to be going up there and expecting to come home with 3 points. I just can't see any result but the Cruise, despite their sort of bad form.
I think Ben Kennedy coming back into this team and finding his footing again. We've seen a bit of a uptick in them recently, and every game will be a chance to sharpen their tools for the this European playoff scenario. So I think ultimately Cruise will win there. I think they'll have the skill and ability and perhaps the drive to win out 2-0 there. Jonny, you beat Carrick. You're well used to Newry last season. Newry are kind of filling that role which your Portadown side had to live through last year. I don't know if you feel any sympathy for Newry going into this, but I'm sure you will recognise the feeling of being bottom of the league, crying out for points, and your team's not playing very well, and you're just going, I don't know how we're going to win, but we'll have to win here somehow.
Yeah, I thought, everybody always talks about that new manager bounce, but I don't think Newry have unfortunately been able to capitalise on that. I think Newry are that cut adrift. I can't see Newry pulling anything back, to be honest. Obviously the Dundela thing will affect the bottom placings in the Premiership, because I think if Dundela win the league, then, and say a Portadown were to finish second, it would be Portadown against the bottom team in the Premiership. So Newry may still have a lifeline. I'm sure them and Ballymena will take a keen interest in who wins the championship. In regards to Carrick, I find Carrick very erratic. Carrick's more than capable of going to the Oval and beating a Glentoran, or going to Windsor and drawing with Linfield, but they've also got that 9-0 defeat in them that they lost to Crusaders. So it's a strange one. I think if Newry want to give themselves any hope whatsoever of getting anything out of it, it's a game maybe that they will have an eye on picking up a point or two. But I just can't see it. I see it maybe a draw written all over, to be honest.
It's funny, Carrick Rangers have been hot and cold this season, week to week, and more recently they've been hot and cold in the same game that they're already playing here. I mean, Carrick need to get a result here themselves if they want to try and have this short little push towards sixth. I think I'm going to back them here. I think it'll be 2-1 Carrick, and again, more troubles for Newry on that occasion. Elsewhere, I mean, Loughgall were the last team to play against Carrick in the league. Entertaining little game. Can they come up and do a bit of damage and score goals against Glentoran? Glentoran have 2 games this week. They've actually got a game against Glenavon on Tuesday, which I'm sure most people will know the result by the time they hear this. Glentoran probably beat Loughgall, especially away. I mean, Loughgall still have the chance of sneaking 6th, but I feel like it's pretty much out of reach. Another David Fisher day at the Oval, Mark?
Well, I hope not anyway. Look, all have excelled all expectations, or should I say exceeded all expectations this season. I think if you'd have told a Loughgall fan that we're going to be 33 points after 30 games, they'd have bit your arm, your leg, and everything else off. Just to be within that position is an absolutely brilliant achievement for them this year. I think I said this a couple of times when I've been on. Loughgall seasons, and it was never going to be defined by how they play at the Oval or how they play at Windsor Park. It was going to be defined by those battles down at Lakeview against teams in and around them, and that's where they've picked up most of their points, which is really really good for them because it's all they really needed to do. You know, let's be honest. I don't think anybody sees Loughgall beating the Glens on Saturday. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe a magic moment from, I don't know, Hawaii or something. Who knows? But I'd say that
Hawaii, we're gonna make that sound a bit more
Hawaii,
fancy, like
yes,
David
David
Fisher.
Fisher, yeah, Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Yeah, I think the Glens have got 2 or 3 goals on them, but yeah, 2 or 3 nil the Glens I would expect anyway.
Yeah, they're kind of running through teams at the minute. I think it's going to be 3-0. Glentoran, again, unfortunately, just by these slightly dead duck games right now. Glenavon against Dungannon Swifts at Mournview. I mean, Dungannon look to be the team that's scoring goals. And fair play, Roddy McGree. I think they'll look back on this season, no matter what happens, and go lots of positives. I'm gonna go for Dungannon winning this one.
Yeah, I think it'll be a tight game. It's like you say, it's a bit of a dead rubber, really, isn't it? Which is, it's the first week in March, but there is those sorts of games. I think Dungannon would just be happy to consolidate. I think it's maybe in the playoff last year, and they've improved on that. So, and Glenavon had been on a good run originally when the new manager came in. They have sort of dropped off in recent weeks, so they'll want to put an end to that bad run. I'm going to sit in the fence as I did for the Carrick-Newry game. I think it'll be a draw.
Mark, they thumped you. They've finally found a bit of life now that this takeover's come through. This is a tricky one for Larne on a Saturday afternoon. I think if they win out here, it's a big statement. I think this might be a little drama-inducing draw, but I mean, everything that goes well for Larne, it's going forward, not conceding at the back. That isn't particularly the strengths of Coleraine. I can't see Coleraine penetrating this back line of Larne, and Colerane's defence has been an issue all season. It could be a draw 1-1. I'm going to give it to be a draw 1-1, 0-0, but again, I think that would be a case of Larne tripping over their own feet, really, there, isn't it?
Yeah, best case scenario for me is a Coleraine draw or a Coleraine win, but unfortunately I do spend a lot of Saturdays checking other results, and it always seems to be going in Larne's favour. There's just no real wobble in that team this year, and by the looks of it, it looks like could very easily be a double this year for them, or a treble if you count the Antrim Shield. But
we don't.
You don't count the Antrim Shield? No?
It is not a part of a treble. None of this.
Okay.
We only count the Mid-Ulster Cup.
Yes, that's the main one. That's okay.
Yeah, Mid-Ulster Cup was definitely a quadruple that would include whatever we call the championship trophy.
Okay, so that's Portadown are going for the treble as well. Sorry, I forgot about that. Yes,
they're going for their own treble. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, back on track here. I think Larne will be able to pull a result out of nowhere. I think I'm only really dreaming. If they won't pull a result out of this one. I'll say a boring 1-0 win for Larne, as most weeks tend to be for me.
Seems very, very likely. Gentlemen, big episode, an important episode covering some big games and some important topics. I really appreciate your time and your honest opinions and fair assessments of all the games and news that went down. Mark, many people know how to find things that you do out there, but if they do not, how can you remind them?
Yeah, just search Mark McGuiggan on Twitter, mostly moaning about Linfield, and that's about all I've got at the moment.
Jonny, where can they find you?
Just search, I think it's Dunlop at Dunlop Jonny on Twitter, where you'll find me doing much the same as Mark, except about Portadown, but I'm a Liverpool supporter as well, so I have the odd joy of them at the moment.
Odd joy indeed. Very, very, very finally, because I feel like I should keep this up. I'm going to ask for a one word or one player answer. I've been asking everybody who they think their player of the season is going to be, with a couple of games to go. Mark, for you, who's first?
You and East.
Jonny, player of the season.
Luke Wilson.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, until next time, good luck on Sunday. Make sure you get flowers to your mummies if they're around before the game. Cheerio.
Cheerio.
Cheers, lads.
Yes, another week where you're all thinking, what is going on? with Peter's voice. I went last week from this head cold sniffliness, and now I've got this weird scruffy kind of voice. If you're new here, my voice does not usually sound this grizzled and hardened. Hopefully this is not a long-term thing. I kind of liked the way I sounded beforehand, but before my voice goes out, may as well get down to business while you're here. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you're new here or you just haven't done it, this is an excellent time to subscribe to the podcast or to follow the podcast. Easy ways to do that. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, which I know is a big player for a lot of you guys out there, just go to the main page, like the homepage of the Kicking Match page, and there's a little icon there, a little wheel or whatever, depends on which one it is, and you can either follow or subscribe. It's free, it's easy, and it means that you're locked in, so that if you forget or you happen to be doing stuff, you might get a notification saying, hey, there's a podcast up, a bit like this time where you got it that slightly bit earlier. You see, you don't have to be on your toes checking, it will deliver it right to you. What a service. But of course, if you've already done that, there's other things you should be doing. You should be following the podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. It's Kicking Match on all of them. Cup final this weekend. I'm sure there'll be plenty of neutrals. I'm looking forward to going to it myself. And if I see you, say hello. If not, it should be a fun weekend across all the games. Because guess what? Like I say, at this time every week, I will see you next week. Cheerio.